I suppose she thought I was too old to notice. Too slow to understand. My daughter-in-law used to tiptoe into my bedroom late at night, thinking I was sound asleep. She'd open drawers, poke through my things, always searching. Always assuming. That night, when she found the drawer with the key, her face drained of color. First pale as bone. Then sickly yellow. She thought she'd uncovered something hidden. And in a way, she had. I lay there in the dark. And smiled. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're joining me from. I want to see just how far this story travels. But let's go back. Because these things never happen all at once. It started on a Thursday. The sun had barely risen when my phone rang. I was still in my nightgown, the old flannel one with the faded roses, standing at the kitchen counter, waiting for the kettle to boil. The windows were fogged from the cold, and the smell of cinnamon oatmeal filled the room. I remember the sound of the spoon clinking against the ceramic bowl. Slow, steady. Familiar. The screen lit up with Emily's name. She didn't usually call this early. In fact, she didn't call much at all. Not unless there was a birthday or a holiday. Something about her voice that morning, tight, polite, but not quite steady, made me pause with the spoon halfway to my mouth. "Hi, Margaret. I hope I'm not waking you." Of course she was. But I said no. She apologized 3 times before she got to the point. She said she'd been laid off. That things with rent had gotten behind. 3 months behind. That it was just temporary, and really embarrassing, and we hate to ask. I could already hear the rest. She wanted to come stay with me. Not alone, of course. With my son, Ethan. My only child. It wasn't the first time someone I loved needed help. And it wouldn't be the last. I glanced around the kitchen. 2 chairs, 1 used. 1 bedroom made, the other full of boxes I never quite sorted after my husband passed. The house was quiet. Almost too quiet. "Of course," I said. "Pack whatever you need. I'll make the guest room ready." There was silence on the other end, followed by a kind of choked relief. "Thank you, Margaret. I really appreciate it. So does Ethan." I believed her. I wanted to. That evening, I pulled out the good plates. The ivory ones with the blue trim. I made meatloaf, Ethan's favorite, and roasted vegetables with rosemary from the little pot on the windowsill. The oven made that soft ticking sound it always did when it cooled. I lit the small candle in the center of the table. Just enough glow to make the room feel warm again. When they arrived, Emily looked exhausted. Dark circles, lips pale, that long gray coat she always wore slightly frayed at the sleeve. Ethan carried their bags. He looked worn down, too, but smiled when he saw me. Hugged me tighter than usual. Emily smiled politely. Said thank you. Took off her shoes neatly by the door and followed me to the dining room like a guest, not family. At dinner, she barely spoke. Nodded, smiled faintly, asked if the rosemary was from the garden. It wasn't a garden, just a little pot on the windowsill, but I said yes anyway. We ate in mostly quiet. The fork-to-plate sounds, the gentle creak of chairs, Ethan telling some story about his last project. Emily listened, but her eyes wandered around the dining room. Not rudely. Not quite. But I noticed. The way you notice a draft you can't see. She glanced once at the corner cabinet where I kept the family photo albums. Once at the locked sideboard drawer. Just a second too long. I poured more water. Cleared the plates myself even though she offered. You must be tired, I said. I'll handle this. She didn't argue. Later that night, I sat in bed with my crossword, the lamp casting a soft circle of yellow onto the pages. I could hear the pipes settling, the muffled sound of the guest room television. I tried not to overthink it. Tried not to read too much into the quiet. They were just tired. That's all. Job loss, stress, change, it wears people down. It makes them strange in their own skin. I knew that feeling well. Still, when I turned off the light and laid back, my thoughts kept circling. It wasn't the words. It was the tone. The way Emily had called me Margaret instead of Mom. The way she walked through the house as if she already knew where everything was. I stared up at the ceiling and told myself not to be unkind. To give her space. Time. But deep down, something inside me whispered different. And that whisper grew louder every night that followed. I don't know, when I opened the door for Emily that evening, what else I was letting in. The first week passed quietly. Almost too quietly. Emily settled into the guest room like someone trying not to leave a footprint. She kept her voice soft, her movements careful, her thanks frequent. Every morning, she made her bed with sharp corners, military tight, as if proving something. Her toothbrush stood straight in the bathroom cup. Her coat always hung neatly on the peg by the door, buttoned up even when it rained. I tried to make her feel at home. I brought in fresh towels. Cleared out a drawer in the dresser. Rearranged the kitchen shelves so there was space for her tea, the expensive chamomile kind she liked, the one in pyramid bags that came in a tin box shaped like a tiny greenhouse. We shared small routines. In the mornings, she sat at the breakfast nook with her cup while I made toast and eggs. She never asked for anything. Just said, whatever's fine, and ate slowly, chewing like every bite took thought. In the evenings, she helped clean up without being asked. Washed dishes while I dried. She folded my laundry with care, even the mismatched socks. Said she found it soothing. I believed her. Or maybe I just wanted to. One night, we sat in the living room, both of us curled under throw blankets while the Weather Channel hummed in the background. She sipped peppermint tea from my favorite mug, the white one with the little chip on the handle, and watched the rain trail down the window. She said, "This place feels so safe." It was such a simple thing to say. But I remember the way she looked around the room when she said it. Not like someone appreciating a home. More like someone assessing a shelter. She wasn't smiling when she said it. Still, I nodded. Told her how the neighborhood hadn't changed much in 20 years. That we didn't even lock the gate most nights. That the only excitement we'd had in a decade was the neighbor's dog getting into Mrs. Huntley's compost. Emily laughed at that. A soft, controlled laugh. Then asked, "Have you ever thought about upgrading your locks? You know, just in case?" It was the kind of question that passed easily if you weren't paying attention. But I was. I told her I'd never had a problem. She said, "That's lucky." And her eyes flicked toward the hallway. Just for a second. The next morning, she asked if she could help organize the pantry. Said it gave her something to do. I handed her the step stool and let her go at it. I heard jars clink, paper rustle, the occasional hum of a tune I didn't recognize. An hour later, the shelves looked spotless. Spices lined up by alphabet. Canned goods in rows like little soldiers. I thanked her and meant it. She smiled and said, "You had a lot of stuff I didn't know you had." Another simple sentence. But my stomach twisted slightly when she said it. That evening, I walked into my bedroom and found the closet door open just an inch. I was sure I'd closed it that morning. I always do. 40 years of habit. But maybe I was mistaken. Maybe I was tired. I closed it without a word. That night, she made tea again. Served it on the old wooden tray with the wobbly leg. Hers sat on the left. Mine on the right. I brought over the shortbread cookies, the kind she liked. As we sipped, she asked, "Have you always lived here alone?" I said yes. Since my husband passed. Just me and the creaks in the floorboards. She nodded slowly, eyes on the teacup. Then she looked up and asked, "Do you keep your important documents in a safe or something?" I looked at her. She looked back, completely still. I told her I kept everything organized. That I didn't like clutter. She smiled and said, "That makes sense. I'm the same way." The conversation moved on. Or maybe I moved it. Later that night, I sat in bed reading. The lamp's light was warm, familiar, casting a soft golden oval on the quilt. My slippers were neatly beside the bed. The humidifier purred quietly in the corner. But I couldn't focus on the words. I kept thinking about her hands, how gently they'd folded my towels. How she knew which cabinet held my allergy pills without asking. How she always offered to fetch the mail, even when it was raining. I wanted to believe it was kindness. Thoughtfulness. Consideration. But it was only Tuesday, and she already knew which drawer in the kitchen stuck a little when you pulled it. Where I kept my birth certificate. That the spare keys were in the ceramic bowl shaped like a pear. I told myself not to read too much into things. People notice more when they're living somewhere. They learn the rhythm of a house. They settle into patterns. Still. The next afternoon, as I shelled peas by the sink, Emily leaned against the doorway with a folded dish towel in her hand. The kitchen smelled like butter and lemon. The afternoon light slanted in through the blinds, striping the counter in golden bars. She said, "Mi je to quan trong o dao." I looked at her. Smiled. Nodded once. But inside? Inside, I didn't smile at all. It started with something small. I opened my dresser drawer one morning and felt a slight tug. It didn't slide the way it usually did. There was a quiet resistance, like it had been pushed shut too hard or not aligned right. I paused, looked inside. Everything seemed where it should be. Neatly folded scarves. A few old letters tied with ribbon. But the top layer felt disturbed. I adjusted the stack and moved on. Told myself I was imagining things. But once you start noticing, you can't stop. The next day, I made the bed and saw the corners weren't tucked the way I always do. I've made that bed the same way for 40 years. 2 hands at the corners, a sharp fold under the mattress, 1 smooth pull across the top. That morning, the sheet on the left side sagged a little. Barely. But I saw it. Felt it. That's the thing about living alone for so long. Your routines become quiet certainties. Everything stays where you leave it. Nothing moves unless you move it. And suddenly, things were moving. A week after Emily and Ethan moved in, I found a single paperclip on the hallway floor. Not a big deal. Just a paperclip. But it was gold, and I only keep silver ones. It was shaped slightly wrong, like it had been bent then straightened again. I picked it up and set it on my desk. It sat there like a tiny question mark. One afternoon, I went upstairs to fetch my book and found the door to my bedroom just slightly open. Maybe an inch. enough to see the shadow of my nightstand against the far wall. I never leave it open. Not since my husband died. Closing that door was part of the day's rhythm. Wake. Dress. Make the bed. Close the door. Move on. But there it was. Open. Again, I told myself I was overthinking. Until Tuesday night. We'd finished dinner late. I'd made lentil stew, simple and warm, and served it with buttered toast. Emily said her head hurt and excused herself early. Ethan stayed behind, helping me wash the dishes. We chatted about the upcoming change in weather. I told him we might get snow by the weekend. About 20 minutes after Emily left the table, I went upstairs to get the heating pad from the linen closet. As I walked past the guest room, I heard the sound of a drawer closing. Not loud. But not subtle either. I paused. Waited. Counted to 5. Then kept walking. Later, when I went to bed, I checked the medicine cabinet in the bathroom. The one with my aspirin and heating balm and allergy pills. Everything was exactly where I left it. All unopened. Untouched. I stood there, staring at the little orange bottle of painkillers. I hadn't moved them in years. That was their place. Right behind the floss. I closed the cabinet door and looked at my reflection. Something in my eyes looked different. Like they'd started asking questions before I could even form the words. The next morning, Emily was cheerful. She offered to make breakfast. Said she was feeling better. She made scrambled eggs and sliced apples. Her movements were fluid, practiced. She even used the pan I liked best, the small cast iron I keep on the back hook. She smiled and poured orange juice without being asked. Set the table just how I do it. Napkin on the left. Forks vertical. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes didn't avoid mine. But mine kept drifting. To the way she used the back door instead of the front to take out the trash. To the way she held her phone slightly tilted when texting. To the way she asked, again, if I needed help reorganizing the filing cabinet in the den. No need, I said. Everything's already in order. She smiled. I bet it is. That afternoon, while she was out for a walk, I went into my room and opened every drawer. One by one. Not to search. Just to feel. The top drawer of the tallboy dresser stuck again. Not much. Just enough to catch on the corner. Inside, my old bills and folded statements looked slightly uneven. A paper slightly off angle. A crease where there hadn't been one. My hand hovered over them, then pulled back. No confrontation. Not yet. Instead, I closed the drawer, slowly and carefully, and sat on the edge of the bed. The house felt quiet. But not peaceful. There's a difference. That night, I laid awake with the lights off and the covers pulled to my chest. The fan in the corner hummed softly. My mind went in loops. Back to the open closet. The paperclip. The almost closed door. Emily's light footsteps on the stairs. The way she always seemed to be standing just behind me when I turned around. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. That she was adjusting. That I was being paranoid. But I didn't believe it. Not really. Instead, I started paying attention. To sounds. To habits. To the way the drawer caught. The way my pillow wasn't quite in its usual spot. And most of all, to time. Because something had changed. Subtly. Quietly. like a shift in air pressure before a storm. And I found myself, without meaning to, memorizing every creak of the hallway floor. Every latch on every cabinet. Every shadow on the staircase at 9:12 p.m. I started remembering exactly how things were. The way the doors should close. The way the towels should fold. I began to memorize the silence. And that's when it happened. I started to remember exactly which drawer made what sound when it opened. And what was supposed to be in each one. I started remembering what shouldn't be touched. I started remembering who I was before I let myself forget. I started remembering everything. I began to recall the precise sound of every door opening. And exactly what was supposed to be where. I always kept the key taped under the second drawer. Not the top one, where people usually look. The second. Right along the underside, tucked beneath a thin strip of black tape. It wasn't fancy. Just a small brass key, barely an inch long. But it opened the safe in my closet. The safe that held all the important things. My will. Insurance papers. The deed to the house. A few small heirlooms. Things no one ever asked about. Because no one had ever needed to. Until now. It was a Wednesday morning when I noticed. The light was soft through the blinds, the kind that makes the dust shimmer in the air. I was organizing receipts, a habit I've never shaken. I opened the second drawer of my dresser to get a manila folder and felt a strange shift. Not the kind your hands notice right away. The kind your memory catches first. The folder was too far forward. The stack too loose. I reached under the drawer with 2 fingers, the way I've done 100 times. Nothing. No tape. No key. Just smooth wood and the echo of my own pulse in my ears. I checked again. And again. I even pulled the drawer out completely, something I hadn't done in years. Held it in my hands like it might explain itself. Still nothing. My knees felt weak. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the drawer resting across my lap. The air in the room felt different. Heavier. I thought of Emily. The way she'd walked past my bedroom the day before. The way her eyes lingered on the hallway for a second too long. The way she'd asked if I needed help reorganizing personal records. Said it with a little smile. Like she was being helpful. That smile didn't feel helpful anymore. That evening, I made salmon with lemon and dill. Steamed rice. Sautéed spinach with garlic. I set the table for 3. Used cloth napkins. Poured water into tall glasses with the lemon slices already floating. I wanted everything to feel normal. Polished. Controlled. Emily came down last. She was wearing the cream sweater I'd given her 2 Christmases ago. The one with the tiny pearl buttons. She said it was too nice to wear, back then. But tonight, she wore it. She complimented the food. Said the rice was perfect. Asked if I'd ever thought of writing a cookbook. Her smile was easy, but her eyes weren't. Halfway through the meal, she set her fork down. Leaned slightly forward. "Margaret," she said, voice light, "can I ask you something a little personal?" I didn't answer right away. She continued. "Do you have life insurance?" "I mean, I'm sure you do. Most people your age do. But Ethan and I were talking, and we realized we don't really know what happens if something were to happen to you." Her tone was polite. Casual. The way you ask someone if they've seen your missing sock. I looked at her. She smiled. Tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Waited. Ethan stared at his plate. I picked up my glass. Took a slow sip. I have everything in order, I said. She tilted her head slightly. That's good. That's really good. I just mean, Ethan's your only family. It would be helpful to know where things are. You know, in case of emergency. I cut a piece of salmon. Chewed slowly. In case of emergency, I repeated. She nodded, pleased with herself. I'm sure the safe has everything, right? Like, the house documents? Your medical stuff? Jewelry, maybe? I didn't answer. Her fork scraped against her plate. Too loud. Too fast. I was just thinking, she said, if you ever needed help organizing, I'm good at that. Filing, sorting. I used to do that kind of thing at my old job. I folded my napkin. Ethan cleared his throat. Mom's always been organized, he said, still not looking at me. She's got it handled. Emily gave him a brief glance. Then back to me. I didn't mean to offend, she said. Just trying to be helpful. Her voice was syrupy sweet. I smiled. And hated myself for it. After dinner, she offered to do the dishes. I let her. I watched from the living room as she moved around the kitchen, drying each plate meticulously, her back straight, her movements precise. She wasn't tired. She wasn't flustered. She was practiced. Later, I went back upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed again. Same spot. Same drawer still out, resting open. I held the manila folder in my hands. Flipped through the pages. Everything was there, in slightly the wrong order. Statements from the bank. A letter from the lawyer. A copy of my will. The back page was smudged. I ran my fingers along the underside of the drawer once more. The tape was gone, too. Peeled clean off. My hand curled into a fist without thinking. That key wasn't lost. It had been taken. Stolen. And whoever took it had known exactly where to look. What to touch. What not to disturb too much. It wasn't a guess. It wasn't a coincidence. It was planned. I looked around the room. My room. My safe space. But tonight, it didn't feel like mine. Something had shifted. Something small, but irrevocable. Emily's voice echoed back in my ears. Do you have life insurance? In case of emergency. I closed the folder and placed it gently back in the drawer. Lined the edges. Smoothed the top. Closed it softly. No sound. Then I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark for a long while. This wasn't intuition anymore. This wasn't gut feeling. This wasn't me being paranoid or tired or old. That wasn't a feeling anymore. That was proof. The house always settles around 11:30. That's when the pipes stop sighing, the floorboards go quiet, and the refrigerator hum becomes the only sound left standing. I've lived with that silence for years. It's soft. Predictable. A kind of lullaby for a woman who spent a lifetime listening for trouble and rarely finding it. But that night, something else stirred. I had just turned over in bed, pulling the quilt up to my chin. The window was cracked open slightly, letting in the cool bite of early spring. A breeze stirred the curtains. My bedside clock glowed a pale blue. 12:04 a.m. I closed my eyes and tried to settle into the quiet. Then I heard it. A voice. Soft. Measured. coming from downstairs. It wasn't the television. That had clicked off over an hour ago. It wasn't Ethan. His snoring had already begun in the guest room next door. It wasn't the radio in the kitchen. I hadn't turned it on all week. It was Emily. I couldn't make out words. Just the rise and fall of her tone. Steady. Almost calm. I sat up. Bare feet to the floor. The wood was cold against my skin. I stepped closer to the old heat vent by the floor. It runs straight down to the kitchen. When the house was built in the 50s, it was meant to carry warmth. But it's just as good at carrying sound. I knelt, slowly, quietly. Leaned my ear in. At first, all I heard was the clink of a glass being set down. Then a pause. The hush of someone checking their surroundings. Then her voice came through. "She's asleep." The words were clear. Clipped. I didn't breathe. Yeah, I checked. Doors shut. Lights off. Another pause. "No, not yet. I'll get it tomorrow night. She's still keeping it in the safe." My heart beat once. Then again, harder. There was a faint scraping sound. Maybe the chair shifting. Maybe her nerves. "There's cash in there. And jewelry. The good kind." I saw the appraisal papers. My hands went cold. "She keeps it all in one place. Easier that way." A silence stretched. Then she said it. "The plan's the same. I'll wait until she takes her sleeping pill. Ethan will be out cold by then too. I just need 10 minutes alone in her room." My mouth went dry. The quilt on my bed suddenly looked like a stranger's. The air in the room too still. "She trusts me. Thinks I'm helping." There was a small laugh. Dry. Hollow. "She has no clue." I pulled back from the vent. Sat down hard on the floor. The room spun slightly. I had loved her like a daughter. Thought she just needed help. Thought life had handed her a bad stretch and she was just trying to stay afloat. I thought I was doing the right thing. I stood slowly, legs trembling. Downstairs, I heard the soft tap of her glass against the counter. Then footsteps. Moving toward the stairs. I slid into bed and pulled the covers over me just before the hallway light flicked on beneath the door. Her steps were slow. Measured. Not the clumsy shuffle of someone sleepy. These were careful, rehearsed. I closed my eyes. The light under the door disappeared. Her door clicked shut. The hallway fell silent again. But my room didn't feel like mine anymore. The mattress didn't feel like safety. The air didn't feel like home. She had been talking about me. About stealing from me. About waiting for the right night. Like I was a mark. A stranger. A problem to be solved. And worst of all, she wasn't working alone. I didn't know who she'd called. But someone out there knew about my safe. My belongings. My habits. They were watching from the outside. She was watching from the inside. I stared up at the ceiling. I could see the faint outlines of the fan blades in the dark. Turning slowly in my imagination, though it hadn't moved in weeks. The anger didn't come right away. First came disbelief. Then shame. How many chances had I given her? How many nights had I stayed up thinking maybe I was wrong to suspect anything? How many meals had I cooked with my back turned? I blinked. Once. Twice. then rolled onto my side. The clock now read 12:47. I wouldn't sleep again that night. I knew that before I even tried. I also knew something else. I had passed the point of hoping I was mistaken. I had passed the point of forgiveness. I didn't sleep again. And I didn't forgive again. The next morning, I sat in the living room holding a cup of tea I'd forgotten to drink. It had gone cold in my hands. Lukewarm, then chilly, until the ceramic felt like stone against my palms. Outside, the sky was dull and low, heavy with a kind of gray that never quite turned to rain. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily. A sound I usually found comforting. Not today. Today, it was the only thing that moved. I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten. The toast I'd made for breakfast sat untouched on the kitchen counter, the butter melting into soft pools. The kettle had boiled and cooled twice before I even poured the tea. Because all I could do was sit. And think. And remember. It was like someone had opened a drawer in my mind. A drawer I hadn't realized was there. Inside were all the little things I'd pushed aside. Dismissed. Smoothed over with kindness. But now they clattered out in sharp pieces. And I started to see them for what they were. 3 weeks ago, Emily arrived with a story about bad luck and lost income. She looked tired. Fragile. Her voice trembled at the right places. Her hands stayed folded politely in her lap. She thanked me for taking them in. Said they just needed a few weeks. Said they'd find a new apartment by the end of the month. That first day, she asked where the linens were. I showed her. She asked where the laundry detergent was. I pointed it out. She never asked again. She remembered everything after being told once. Like she was memorizing the blueprints of the house. At the time, I thought it was considerate. Now, I saw it differently. I remembered how she watched me count change at the farmer's market. How her eyes stayed too long on the envelope of cash I kept tucked in my bag. How she offered to carry the groceries but always lingered when I unlocked the front door. I remembered how she always seemed to be in the right place. Near the hallway when I left my room. In the kitchen when I opened mail. In the laundry room when I counted the spare keys. She asked if I needed help reorganizing the den. Asked where I kept Ethan's birth certificate. Said it was smart to keep everything in one place. Smart. That was the word she used. I remembered one afternoon in the second week, when I caught her near the hall closet. She smiled quickly, said she was looking for the vacuum. The vacuum sits in the laundry room. Always has. I didn't say anything. Just nodded. She never asked again. But the next day, I found the closet door ajar. I thought back to the little paperclip on the hallway floor. Gold. Slightly bent. Not mine. The more I thought, the more pieces clicked into place. The bedtime tea. Always offered, never asked. The accidental glance at my desk drawer. The questions about wills, insurance, the quiet jokes about getting old. I remembered the time she brought me the mail and handed me a letter already opened. Said it must have torn in the box. I had believed her. I had wanted to. I closed my eyes and leaned back into the chair, the old one with the faded blue cushion and the threadbare armrests. My fingers ran along the edge where the fabric had started to fray. It grounded me. This house had held me together for so long. Through grief. Through loneliness. Through the quiet. And now it had held a thief. A very polite, careful, well-dressed thief. One who brought tea and folded towels and complimented my roast chicken. She wasn't here because she needed a place to stay. She was here because she needed access. Time. Routine. Familiarity. The kind that makes people drop their guard. I looked down at my hands. Still holding that cold cup of tea. Still shaking, just slightly. The betrayal didn't burn. It chilled. Because it hadn't been loud. It hadn't been violent. It had been quiet. Surgical. Done in whispers and glances and small, forgettable kindnesses. Emily hadn't lost her job. Emily hadn't lost anything. She had been gaining. Learning. Watching. And now, I knew what she was really good at. Not bookkeeping. Not homemaking. She was good at studying people. At making them comfortable. At walking through someone's life like it was already hers. I set the teacup down gently on the side table. A wind outside stirred the trees. One of the branches scraped lightly against the windowpane. The sound made me flinch. This wasn't my imagination anymore. This wasn't paranoia. This was a slow, methodical infiltration. Emily wasn't unemployed. She was working. Very hard. Just not for anyone but herself. By sunrise, the rage had burned itself out. What remained was something colder. Sharper. Like the quiet edge of a knife freshly honed. I stood by the kitchen window, watching steam rise from my coffee, and felt a stillness settle in me. Not peace. Not fear. Just the kind of silence that comes after you finally decide what needs to be done. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. People like Emily count on confrontation. They prepare for it. Expect emotion. Expect you to fall apart, to get flustered. To beg. To scream. But I'd learned long ago that silence is its own kind of weapon. So I let the morning pass like any other. Made eggs. Toasted sourdough. Set the table with my usual care. When Emily came down, she wore her softest voice and a freshly pressed shirt. She asked if I'd slept well. I said I had. She smiled. Poured herself orange juice. Took the seat across from me like she owned the table. I watched her hands as she reached for the butter. Smooth. Calm. Too calm. Later that morning, I told them I had a few errands to run. Nothing important. Just groceries. Maybe the hardware store. Emily nodded without much interest. Ethan was already in the den, on one of his long Zoom calls. I left the house at 10:17. By 10:45, I was standing in the electronics aisle at Baxter's. The young man behind the counter had a nose ring and called me ma'am 5 times in under 2 minutes, but he knew his gadgets. I need a camera, I said. Small. Wireless. Something discreet. He showed me a few. I chose the one shaped like a decorative clock. It had night vision. Motion sensors. Streamed live to my phone. I held the box in my hands and imagined Emily's face, caught in the soft green glow of infrared light. Next, I drove to a little party supply store tucked behind the strip mall. I hadn't been there in years. It still smelled like dust and helium. A woman with glitter in her hair asked if I needed help. I'm looking for a music box, I said. Something I can tinker with. She raised an eyebrow but showed me to the aisle. I picked a small one with a ballerina inside. Pink. Innocent. With just enough room for a hidden spring and a burst of surprise. At the checkout, I added 2 packets of fine glitter. Silver and gold. The kind that clings to skin and fabric and refuses to wash out. The kind that leaves a mark. I drove home with the bags in the trunk, the car humming steadily beneath me. Outside, the clouds had thinned. Sunlight hit the windshield in narrow beams. But inside, I felt no warmth. Only purpose. When I walked through the front door, Emily was in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone. She looked up and smiled. "Get everything you needed?" "Yes," I said. I didn't look away. She blinked first. I went upstairs and closed my bedroom door softly. Laid everything out on the bed like a surgeon before a procedure. The camera. The box. The tools. The glitter. It was all so small. So ordinary. And yet, it felt like the beginning of something enormous. I installed the camera first. Tucked it high on the bookshelf, behind the framed photo of my wedding day. It blended perfectly. I checked the app on my phone. The image was clear. The angle covered the dresser and the doorway. Audio, too. Next, I turned to the music box. I removed the ballerina. Emptied the inner cavity. Replaced the mechanism with a tiny spring-loaded confetti popper I'd built from old birthday party supplies. I filled it with the glitter, careful not to overload it. I tested it once with a spoon. It exploded perfectly. A silent poof of color and dust. Reset. Resealed. Then I nestled it into the back of the drawer where I used to keep the real key. I placed an old brass luggage key in the front corner, easy to spot. A decoy. Something to lure her in. Let her think she'd won. When she reached for it, the trap would spring. Glitter in her face. Her hair. Her clothes. It wasn't about the mess. It was about exposure. About being seen. About taking back the narrative before she rewrote mine. When I finished, I stood in the middle of my room and looked around. Everything looked the same. Nothing was the same. I opened the window slightly. Let the breeze in. The curtains fluttered against my leg. Somewhere downstairs, a drawer closed. Her drawer. I didn't flinch. I felt ready. I wasn't just some old woman with soft hands and stories. I had raised a son. Buried a husband. Paid off a mortgage. Fixed toilets and bathtubs and broken fences. I had balanced budgets. Balanced grief. Balanced people who needed more than they gave. And I had survived it all. I wasn't about to be undone by a daughter-in-law with steady hands and false smiles. If she wanted to act like a thief, I was going to show her what it felt like to get caught. I waited until the house was quiet again. It was nearly 1 a.m, the hour when breath slows and creaks return to wood. I moved like I used to when Ethan was a baby and finally asleep, slow, deliberate, every step padded. Even the floor knew not to betray me. The clock on my nightstand ticked in soft rhythm. I didn't bother with the lamp. I didn't need light to find my way around my own room. The camera was already in place. I'd positioned it earlier that afternoon behind a stack of old hardcovers, the ones with cracked spines and dust in the corners. Books no one touched anymore. Which made them perfect. Through my phone, I could see the room from the lens. The feed was clear. Framed just right. It looked like a still life. Dresser. Closet door. The edge of the mirror reflecting the muted light from the hallway night bulb. There was something calming about seeing it from that angle. Like I was both inside and outside my own story. I moved to the dresser and opened the second drawer. It gave a familiar creak. The kind only I would notice. Inside, everything looked normal. My handkerchiefs. An old photo album. A small tin of buttons that hadn't been used in years. But tucked in the back, nestled like an innocent keepsake, was the music box. Pink. Dainty. A little ballerina still twirling in place, not knowing what waited inside. I opened it once more, carefully, just to make sure. The mechanism sat tight. The spring coiled. The glitter, fine and floating, silver and pink, rested just behind the false lid. I had sprinkled in a touch of cornstarch to help it cling better. It wouldn't disappear with a single swipe. It would settle into skin, hair, fabric. A fingerprint she couldn't wipe away. I reset the lid. Placed it gently in the back right corner. Then in the front, almost carelessly, I dropped the decoy key. Old brass. Real, but useless. Just bait. I smoothed the handkerchiefs over everything, the way I always had. Closed the drawer slowly, pressing just enough so it looked untouched. Then I climbed into bed and pulled the covers up to my chest. The camera lens blinked once. Still watching. I waited. At 1:38, the hallway light flicked on. Soft. Quick. I didn't move. The door creaked open. 2 inches. Then 3. No knock. Just that long, slow pause of someone measuring how deeply you're sleeping. She stepped in. I didn't have to see her. I knew her steps now. The slight drag in the right foot. The rhythm too steady for someone uncertain. She walked like a person who believed she belonged. Her shadow crossed the carpet. I heard the drawer open. Not all the way. Just enough. The air shifted. Then. A snap. A small thump. Followed by a sharp intake of breath. The kind of breath that says oh no, but too late. Then silence. Then footsteps again. Quicker. Out of the room. Down the hall. A door closing. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Then I sat up, turned on the lamp, and opened the drawer. Confetti everywhere. Floating like celebration. Like accusation. Silver and pink clinging to the edge of the drawer, speckling the handkerchiefs, glinting even under the soft yellow light. I picked up the music box, now sprung open. It looked almost innocent again. I turned to the bookshelf. Picked up my phone. Pressed play. There she was. Framed in soft black and white, moving with confidence. Opening my drawer. Reaching in. The moment her fingers touched the key, the lid burst. Glitter covered her from the chin down. She recoiled. Tried to wipe it away. But it was too late. I watched the clip twice. Not for satisfaction. For clarity. I didn't need to guess anymore. I didn't need to ask. She had told me everything I needed to know just by walking into that room. By touching what wasn't hers. By thinking I was still asleep. I turned off the lamp. Slid back under the covers. My heart wasn't racing. It beat steady. Measured. Prepared. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to cry. I didn't need to ask why. I just needed to let the glitter do the talking. Dinner that evening was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that hums underneath the surface, like the moment before a summer storm cracks the sky. We ate in our usual spots, with the television murmuring low in the background. The local news. Something about traffic delays. A feel-good piece about a golden retriever who saved a toddler from a lake. Emily laughed at the right parts. She complimented the roasted chicken. Said it was tender. Said I always knew how to make simple food taste like something more. I thanked her and offered her more green beans. She declined, gently pressing a cloth napkin to her lips like a scene from a polite dinner party. Her eyes never really left me. Not directly. But I could feel it. Every time I reached for the salt. Every time I took a sip of water. She was watching. Waiting. At one point, she looked up and said, a little too lightly, "Do you ever drink wine, Margaret?" I shook my head. Not really. Not since the blood pressure medication. Makes me feel fuzzy. She smiled. That makes sense. I just thought, sometimes a little wine helps take the edge off before bed. I returned her smile with one of my own. Warm. Familiar. The kind of smile that says I trust you. Well, I said, tonight I think I'll just have tea. She nodded and rose to pour herself a glass of the red blend she'd bought last week. Said it was for special occasions. Tonight, apparently, counted. I sipped my chamomile while she drank her wine. Ethan had already disappeared into the den, headphones on, eyes glazed over in front of his laptop. I heard the soft clack of his keyboard echo from down the hall. He was oblivious, as always. Which, tonight, suited me fine. Emily and I chatted about nothing. She asked if I'd ever traveled abroad. I told her about a trip to Portugal in the 80s. About walking along cobblestone streets that shimmered with sea mist. She asked what the food was like. I said warm. Simple. Heavy with garlic and olive oil. She listened. Smiled. Sipped her wine. Her tone was light. Her posture relaxed. But her eyes kept drifting. Once to the hallway. Once to the clock. Once, barely, to the stairs. She was checking the time. Checking how long until I'd retreat to my room. I stood after finishing my tea and said, I think I'll head to bed a little early. Long day. Emily stood too. Too quickly. Her napkin slid from her lap. She picked it up. Smiled again. Of course. You rest. I'll clean up down here. I thanked her and moved toward the stairs. Her voice followed me. Sleep well, Margaret. It wasn't a wish. It was a prompt. I turned slightly. Gave her one last smile. One that said thank you for the kindness, the wine, the conversation. Then I walked up slowly, as if tired. As if nothing in the world weighed heavier on me than a full belly and a long day. Once upstairs, I turned off the lights. Slipped into my nightgown. Closed the door, but not all the way. Just enough to let the hallway light spill in. Then I crossed the room, careful not to disturb the drawer or the camera's angle. Slid beneath the covers. Rolled onto my side, facing the wall. The phone was tucked under the pillow beside me. Screen dimmed. Recording live. I waited. The house breathed around me. The clock ticked. The air vent whispered. Downstairs, dishes clinked gently. Water ran. The dishwasher clicked closed. Then nothing. Then footsteps. I closed my eyes. They crept up slow. pausing every third step. A dance she'd rehearsed before. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't tremble. I stayed still. Played my part. The bedroom door creaked. Slowly. I heard the carpet give beneath her feet. Heard the drawer open. Gently. Barely a sound. Then. The snap. The soft hiss of glitter bursting. A gasp. The unmistakable sound of someone caught between two lives. I didn't move. Not yet. I waited until the steps retreated. Until the bathroom door clicked shut. Then I opened my eyes and rolled onto my back. Stared up at the ceiling fan. Felt the air shift as my breath came steady and sure. I reached under the pillow and picked up my phone. Watched the playback in silence. The angle was perfect. Her face, startled. Her hands covered in pink and silver. Her eyes wide, darting to the door, to the dresser, to the mess. She didn't scream. But she didn't need to. The glitter said everything. Tomorrow, she would have a story. All manipulators do. But tonight? Tonight, she was marked. I had played my role well. Better than I thought I could. I had never acted before. But tonight I did. And to my surprise, I was good at it. It was exactly 2:38 a.m. when she came in. The softest click of the door, barely more than a whisper. If I hadn't been listening for it, I might have missed it. But I was awake. Eyes closed, breath steady. Heart calm. The hallway light poured in just enough to stretch a yellow ribbon across the floor. I saw her shadow first. Slender. Slow. Careful. She paused just inside the doorway, letting her eyes adjust to the dark. I didn't move. She stepped closer. Quiet as falling dust. The carpet muffled everything but not completely. My ears caught the sound of her breathing. Measured. Intent. The drawer slid open. And then. A soft snap. A muffled pop. A sudden, shimmering gasp. It wasn't loud. But it didn't need to be. I opened my eyes and sat up just as she recoiled, her hands shooting up to her face. The room, once quiet and shadowed, was now lit by the soft lamp glow as I flicked the switch. My fingers were steady. My face, still. She stood frozen. And glitter, fine, dancing, chaotic, clung to everything. It shimmered in her hair. Sparkled across her cheeks. Spilled down her sweater like stardust. Pink. Silver. Bright and loud in the hush of the room. It coated her fingers, her sleeves, the front of her nightclothes. She looked like she'd been gift-wrapped by panic itself. I let the silence stretch for 3 full seconds before I spoke. "Oh," I said, blinking slowly, voice quiet. "Emily?" She turned toward me in slow horror, like a marionette unsure who was pulling the strings. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. I thought I heard something," she stammered, her hands still raised as if that might stop the glitter from spreading. I tilted my head, calm as ever. "In my dresser?" She blinked. No, I was just checking." "For what?" I asked, still sitting. Still calm. "Medicine? Socks? A hidden piano?" The words weren't sharp. They were soft. Too soft. The kind that sting more because they don't shout. She tried to laugh. It cracked midway and died in her throat. Glitter glinted on her lips. I thought you were asleep, she said quietly. I nodded once. I know. She looked down at her hands, now glowing faintly pink in the lamplight. The glitter wouldn't come off easy. That was the point. I can explain, she whispered. I kept my voice even. Can you? She didn't answer. I stood up slowly, letting the quilt fall behind me, the lamp casting a soft ring around us both. The drawer behind her remained open, music box askew, the fake key barely visible beneath the thin sparkle of betrayal. I walked toward her. Not fast. Not threatening. Just deliberate. She flinched when I reached out, not to strike, not to grab, but to gently pluck a piece of glitter from her chin. I held it up between us. It sticks, doesn't it? I said softly. Hard to hide. She took a shaky breath. The silence settled again, broken only by the quiet mechanical hum of the heater switching on. I looked at her. And then I asked. Not with anger. Not even with accusation. But something deeper. Why my drawer, Emily? She didn't answer. She only stared. Coated in sparkle. Like a party favor. Caught mid-theft. Why my drawer, Emily? I sat back on the edge of my bed, the lamp casting a soft, forgiving glow over the room. My hand hovered over the phone, still recording. I didn't hesitate. Nothing could undo what had just happened. It was time for clarity. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, crisp and sharp in the silence. She's asleep. Doors locked. Lights off. She paused. Then continued. I found statements. Jewelry appraisal. The cash. It's all there. She keeps it in the safe. Another beat. Plans still the same. After the pill. Ethan will be out too. 10 minutes alone. I held the phone steady as I watched Emily's face. Reflected in the screen, her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened and closed, like she was searching for air. Behind her, the dresser stood open, the glitter mess untouched until now. Then footsteps. Ethan appeared in the doorway. Rubbed his eyes. Wore a robe. Still half asleep. He saw the phone, the look on my face, the glitter still shimmering in the lamplight. Mom, he murmured. Emily spun toward him, desperation all over her face. No. No, this isn't what it looks like. She took a step forward but hesitated, head tilted in confusion. I didn't flinch. I didn't glare. I let the phone do the talking. Ethan listened. Face draining of sleep. His brow furrowed. My heart squeezed, but I didn't look away. He stood behind his wife as she turned toward me, still coated in confetti, clutching at the useless luggage key in her trembling fingers. The recording ended, leaving our bedroom thick with a silence that felt like metal. Emily swallowed, her hands shaking. I can explain, she whispered, voice fragile. Ethan's eyes found mine. Hesitated. Then to his wife. This, you were going to. 10 minutes alone in her room. The phone's playback echoed in his memory now. Emily's voice broke. Listen, Ethan, I was just trying to help. She's old. She forgets things. If something happened. I just wanted to make sure. Make sure what? He stared at her. I watched, breathing slow. Her excuses felt small in the glow of exposure. In that moment, nothing she said could fix what she'd done, what she'd admitted. He shook his head. Silence snapped. Finally he spoke. What's going on? His voice was distant, haunted. Not at all like the reassurance I remembered. She opened her mouth, closed it. Took a step toward him. But stopped. At that moment, the phone's screen lit up again. A new message popped. Something had come through while she'd been speaking. I held the device up, not meeting her eyes. Tomorrow night works. Moving on Wednesday. Got the key and her money. She trusts us. Ethan read it. His head fell. Emily looked up, glowing with guilt. I looked at both of them. And then I said 5 words that would change everything. Do you want to explain that? Her eyes darted from me, to the phone, to Ethan. She managed a flicker of pride before it vanished. Yes, she would explain. But not enough. Because by then, there was nothing left to say. She argued, stumbled, tried to bend the truth like a broken wire. But the phone had said it all before she could start. She argued. But the phone had already spoken. 3 months passed like breath on glass. Slow. Quiet. Clear only when you stepped back to look. Emily was gone by the end of that week. No scene. No screaming. Just packed bags and a half-hearted apology delivered in a whisper. Ethan drove her to the station. He didn't speak when he returned. Didn't need to. Some things don't require discussion. They just require time. The house settled again. Like an old quilt shaken out and laid flat. The rooms breathed differently. Lighter. Cleaner. I woke each morning before the sun. Made tea with just the right amount of honey. Walked barefoot across the kitchen tile to open the curtains and let the early light spill in. Sometimes it was golden. Sometimes soft gray. Either way, it felt like a kind of prayer. The garden had grown wild during those weeks. I hadn't noticed the ivy creeping toward the roses or the way the lavender bent under its own weight. But now I tended to them again. Hands in the dirt. Fingernails full of earth. Knees aching but alive. I pruned and watered and whispered to the plants as I had for years. Called them by names no one else knew. Old habits. They came back like muscle memory. In the afternoons, I read. Not the heavy biographies or crime thrillers I once devoured. Now it was cookbooks. Novels with soft endings. Magazines with crossword puzzles in the back. I folded pages that made me smile. Kept a notebook beside me where I wrote down recipes I'd never try. But still, I wrote them. Ethan was still here. He came to breakfast. Helped with groceries. Fixed the gate hinge without being asked. Some evenings we played cards. Some we didn't speak. That was okay. Healing doesn't need words. Sometimes it just needs space. I never brought up the recording again. He never asked to hear it. But he kept the file on his phone. I saw it once when he scrolled too fast through his gallery. He didn't notice. I didn't mention it. And Emily? I don't know where she is now. I don't check. I don't ask. I don't hate her. Hate is a burden that takes more energy than I'm willing to give. One morning, I was frosting a batch of lemon cupcakes when Helen from next door knocked on the screen door. She wore her gardening gloves, still dusted in soil. Held a cup of coffee in one hand and a tired smile in the other. "You still have that glitter bomb thing?" she asked, half laughing. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "For Sadie's birthday." She wants sparkle in everything. Even the cake. Thought maybe your contraption could make a good surprise. I wiped my hands on a towel and laughed softly. I'm afraid I retired it. Helen tilted her head. Shame. It made quite the statement. I nodded. It did, I said. But next time I use glitter, it'll be on cupcakes. She smiled and wandered off, muttering something about sprinkles and ribbons. I returned to my mixing bowl. Swirled the frosting until it held peaks like soft clouds. Dusted just a touch of edible shimmer on top. I stood there a moment longer. Let the silence fill the kitchen. No footsteps. No whispers in the vent. No eyes watching me when I turned my back. Just the hum of the refrigerator. The clock ticking. My own breath. I looked around this house, my house, and felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Not fear. Not even pride. Just something firm. Something mine. I had protected what was mine. Not with a lock. Not with a shout. But with stillness. And strategy. And something else. Something I thought I'd lost when I became old. Instinct. And love. Real love. The kind that holds space for truth without folding under it. The kind that learns where the line is, and stands there steady. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't need to. I felt sure. Safe. Like the woman I used to be. Like the woman I had never really stopped being. I wasn't angry anymore. I just knew. I had learned to protect myself. With both logic and love.